Sadiq, an expert on AI, and Emma House, the publishing expert, and Mr. Oscar Pujol, director of Cervantes Institute. I will introduce them in detail later. So let us, our chief editor, Ms. Meera Jain, will felicitate. Oscar Pujol. And Emma House. Nadeem Sadiq. As I said, Nadeem is an expert on AI, and he works in the area of machine translation, and he did a wonderful speech in our CEO Speak on the future of AI. And Emma is a publishing expert. I know Emma as the person behind the India book report. So, and you work with the London Book Fair, and now she's also part of Shimmer AI. And Emma speaks English, Spanish, and some French, Portuguese, Italian, and some Arabic. So it's an interesting multilingual. She is also a multilingual person. Oscar is quite different. Oscar is a language person. I would more than the director of Cervantes Institute, I will introduce him as a translator. Oscar translates from Sanskrit to Catalan, which is his mother tongue, and to Spanish, which is the language of his country. So Oscar did his PhD in Sanskrit. Please come. So, Oscar also did two dictionaries, one Sanskrit Catalan dictionary and Catalan Sanskrit Spanish dictionary. So I will request Mr. Oscar to start the session. It is initiated.
Yes, thank you very much, Ruby. It's such a pleasure to be here today with you. And well, let me start saying that I also come from a Bahubashi country, a country which speaks different languages. We have 4 languages in Spain besides Spanish. And we are used to this linguistic diversity in our own country. I am native bilingual, so it means that right from I think I have 2 mother tongues, not only one, because I learned both Catalan and Spanish at the same time. At that time, we used to use Catalan at home, and at that time, our language was during the dictatorship, and our language was somehow repressed. We could not study our own language, which is a thing that I think it's a very important thing. When you cannot study in your own mother tongue, you lose some abilities, I mean, I am a Catalan speaker, but I write better in Spanish, and I give lectures better in Spanish because I never had an education in Catalan, because that was during Franco's times, during the dictatorship time. This changed very much.
एक 14 वर्षीय बच्ची नव्या नाम है, व्हाइट टॉप पहना हुआ है, अपने पिता से बिछड़ रही है, जहां भी आसपास दिख रही है.
This change,
as
I said, this change after when democracy came to Spain in 75, And then after that,
कृपया ध्यान दें
we could study in Catalan, which was not possible before.
नव्या नाम है व्हाइट टॉप पहना हुआ है अपने पिता से बिछड़ गई है जहाँ कहीं भी है हॉल नंबर 5 के रिसेप्शन काउंटर तक उन्हें पहुंचाने की कृपा करें
Okay, let's continue. So I was saying, I didn't have my academic formation in Catalan, but in Spanish this changed clearly after, and now Catalan it's really a language that you can learn right from the beginning, and the situation has changed completely. I am saying this because I think here in India you're used to have a multilingual society, no? And having a multilingual society, I think, is such a boon that you take it for granted. Don't take it for granted, right? There are many countries where language has been repressed, and I think in India you had really the good fortune of having this diversity, this language diversity accepted right from the beginning. And I think that enriches a lot of people and your view of your own country. You know, different languages also is a wealth for your own country. I think I stop here because my main theme is translation, but I don't want to extend too much. There are more speakers, and I think we can continue with that.
Yeah, now I would request Mr. Michael Paul, this director of the Austrian Culture Center, to make his initiative.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for being late here this afternoon. I was on another dice about Austrian literature, and yeah, so I couldn't be on two places at the same time, but I still work on it. But it was really fast. Very much welcome here to be with us together this afternoon. I'm the head of the Austrian Cultural Forum in New Delhi, and we try to bring also Austrian literature to New Delhi and to India. This is always a big task because our editors and also printing houses and all these publishers, they're not used to such a huge market. We deal mostly with the German market, a little bit with the Swiss one, and translations are made from time to time. We have even literature Nobel Prize laureates, so they are translated very much into foreign languages. But we ourselves in Austria, we speak mostly German, because we were once a bigger country till 1918. Yeah, until that time we had many languages. Even the Ukrainian part, a little bit, the Western Ukraine was Austrian at that time, Austro-Hungarian. So we had Hungarian, Croatian, and so many languages. And this was lost 1918. And then we were reduced to the German-speaking part of this Austrian Empire. So we were not so much anymore in contact with foreign languages. Even we had minorities in the southern part, Slovenian and then Hungarians. And these languages, they are still now spoken, and now they have also minority rights with treaties and secured. So even the cities are in two languages written, the names of the cities. There's education, but not studies. Studies is not possible. There's education till the 12th grade in these minority languages, we say. And there are also well-known authors which are bilingual. This is the interesting thing. They brought it really to a high stage, so we are working still on that and supporting that also. And now as we have so many immigrants in Austria, we see many more languages coming in. And this is more diverse now than it was, let's say, in my childhood. 60 years ago, this was completely different. In my school, there was not even one foreign language spoken in the beginning. But then at the end we had one foreigner, and then later on it were more and more and more. But this is a relatively new phenomenon, different than in Spain, because Catalans are there for forever, I would say, no? Yeah, thank you. This is, let's say, my statement for the beginning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Emma, you worked in publishing, so
Yes.
your experience will be different.
Yeah, so my role over the last 20 years has been to help UK publishers understand international markets and how to do business with international markets. And India has always been a bit of a mystery to many UK publishers. So whilst the country of India is well known for its tourism and of course the food and the cookery and the culture, I think the language side of things has often been misunderstood, especially when it comes to the publishing industry and either encouraging translations from English into Indian languages or from Indian languages into English for the UK market. I think it's still pretty much unknown amongst UK publishers that, for example, there's a whole industry in Malayalam and a wealth of readership in Malayalam and authorship. I was recently at the Kerala Literature Festival, which had days and tents of programming of Malayalam authors, which still to date are unknown in our country, and I think that's a missed opportunity and something that we need to work on. Similarly with languages like Tamil, and there's a huge emphasis now on trying to export and translate Tamil literature, in particular to English, but to different languages, so that we can better understand the culture and the people and the history of different parts of India, and not recognize it purely just as one country, but about the multilingual aspects and the different cultures and the different cookery and the different languages. So from my perspective, I think things like book fairs and these forums, I was particularly pleased that the theme this year was multilingual India, to really help educate people about the different languages outside of the UK.
Yeah, thank you. Now, Nadeem, so you have another tech perspective from a technologist.
Well, I do. I have an AI perspective on it, but actually, my name's Nadeem Sadek, but I'm half Irish and half Egyptian, and so my first experiences in life were hearing two different languages, and then my parents spoke to each other in English and in Arabic. But my father joined the World Health Organization when I was 2 months old, and we moved to Togo, Dahomey, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Malaysia, Indonesia, Barbados, and in every one of those countries, I learned another language. I've forgotten half of it, but my formative periods, the first 18 years of my life, I was surrounded by a multilingual living tradition, just like this talk is about. And I really learned how small connections through the effort to make language something that you share with people can foster community, good relationships. So, for example, in Arabic, if you want to say, what's your news, you say "Zay al-akhbar." And in Indonesian, in Bahasa Indonesian, you say "Apa kabar." Zay al-akhbar, apa kabar. You see it going the whole way from the Middle East right down to Southeast Asia. And I've really learned that the whole way through. So the word coffee, is in Arabic it's ahwa, and in Swahili it's kahawa, and so it becomes coffee in English. And just being able to draw those little links means that as you go from country to country, and I've been in India, within all the different traditions of language, you get bonds that are much deeper than just what you say, you believe in, or your values, or how you live. The language binds you much more carefully too. I can talk about AI later, but my own experience really in life is that language is an incredibly important bonding agent across culture. And if you make an effort to speak somebody else's language, it's always appreciated.
Thank you. So, Oscar, you said that there are languages oppressed and natural. And in India, at least the main languages are it is quite common. It is very living. So, two questions. One, how do you see this Indian situation of different languages coexisting? And in some countries or cultures, some languages are being oppressed. And even in India, smaller languages are not getting. Yeah, dialects. So, what is your? How do you view this?
Well, I will take your question from another angle, if you allow me, because I think that one thing that is essential if you live in a multilingual society is how you translate between languages, because translation is really the escape route from a monolingual society where only one language is really ruling. No? And about translating Indian languages into European languages, there is one concept that to me is very important, and I think we have to, and I call that traditions of translation, right? And this stems from the fact that we realized that it took 200 years to translate well from Sanskrit to English. And I say English, I don't say Spanish because we are far behind you. Okay, but really, the translations, the first translations from English and writers from Sanskrit into English, either they were too literal and you could not read them properly, or they were too free, you know. And it was a real problem. It's only after Second World War that we begin to have good translations in the English language. We have now the Mahabharata, Van Buitenen, we have the Ramayana, by Goldman, we have the Ramcharitmanas, by Ludendorff. They're all Americans and British people. And now you think 200 years to be able. Why that happens? There are two reasons. The first one is that you have to build traditions of translation. What means that? That means that you're practicing translation through a long time. For instance, I can read Shakespeare in Spanish in different translations. Okay, I can read, say, a French author, Marcel Proust, in different versions in Spanish from the French, because there is a tradition of translation between Spanish and English, between Spanish and French. And my question is the following. Of course, there is still not a tradition of translations between Sanskrit and Spanish. We are working for that, right? But what I want to say, and that's very important to me, there are also traditions of translations between Hindi and Tamil. There is a Hindi-speaking person able to read a Tamil word in a proper Hindi translation. There are traditions of translations between Malayalam and Bengali. Can a Malayalam person read, you know, a translation of Tagore into Malayalam in perfect? I don't know. That's a question. I doubt it, and you know better than me because we know. But that's very important because if translations are not good, you cannot appreciate the literary words of other languages. And I always think what Rushdie said in the 90s when he said that the only good literature in India was written in English. My question is, could he say that? Could he read a good Tamil word in a good English translation? That happens, because if not, he has no resources to say that because he's not being able to read that literature in proper translation. So, to sum up, no, it took 200 years, but it took 200 years for another reason too, because we still were learning how to translate in the 19th century. Translation is a very difficult business. Because, and you know, we didn't have a good translation theory till the end of the 20th century. Now we know how to translate. So that was also a factor in the delay in building this tradition of translation. Now, how long may it take in today's time build a solid tradition of translation, say between Sanskrit and Spanish, or say between Malayalam and Hindi? I don't know. And maybe AI has also something to say about that. But my only point was that translation is the bridge for a multilingual world. Our future lies in translation. Translation is an art, but it's also a technique. And now, really, we have a very good theory of translation. We know how to do that, but of course, you must have the linguistic skills to do so. So that's more. So I think in a multilingual society, and to avoid oppression of language, translation is the only thing that we must really cultivate.
Thank you, Oscar. Yes, there are good translations from Bangla, Malayalam, and all. But it is how much material data available you store. That is important. I think. Bangla, Malayalam, there are a lot, but not that much from Bangla, Telugu, or several languages. It is not. So, to Michael Paul, you were saying about the new languages coming to Europe. I mean, it is not just an issue in Austria. In many European countries. So, how do Europe's addressing this multilingual situation?
Yeah, we start now in the schools, in the basic education, to use the mother tongue, because it's more easy for the kids when they're the first time in contact with German, if they learn it in their mother tongue, their language, grammar, and everything, the theory of language. And then they start to grasp what is the German language. Because many of them, they live here in a new country and they don't have any contact, not a major contact with the new language. And so we educate them now in special environments in their mother tongue, integrate them in the schools, and there then we try to bring them to the German knowledge. Because this is still very essential, because in the daily life, we use only German. This is not really a practice that we speak different languages. I do it with my family because we have 3 languages in one family. So when we drive with the metro, people are looking at us, oh, what's going on here? One family and talking in 3 languages with each other. This is okay. This is not very often the case, you know. This is German, Macedonian, and English. So this is not so easy for everybody to grasp. But this is from practice, you know. You need to practice a language. And this leads me to Esperanto. I don't know who has heard of Esperanto. There's even a museum in Vienna, the Esperanto Museum. I think the only in the world. I don't know if there's another one. And there we can see that the issue of a language and how it's used is also a matter of power, you know. You need, in our society, we are organized as human beings, we are organized in states. States have power, different powers, and in the old days it was the Roman Empire, everybody had to speak Latinic. This lasted till the Middle Ages. All educated people spoke Latinic, otherwise there was no education for them, because the major books they were reading and giving to the next generation in Latin. And still some studies, if you study deeper in history, and so you have to learn this basic old Aramaic, all the old languages, you know. And this is, but it's fading away. You know, who knows Aramaic? It's a very fantastic thing to get into the old scripts, but it doesn't help you nowadays. Nowadays, for business, you need English, Spanish, the major languages. Chinese also, this is needed because this is one of the big languages now, because there are powers behind. And unfortunately, this Esperanto idea, which was in my mind, is not a bad idea. To create something new, everybody could come in on an equal level, you know. This would be nice, but I think this is future. Maybe it will happen one day.
And Emma, you work with Arabic publishers in a big way.
Yes, I do. Yes.
So Arabic publishing.
Yes.
So, what is the language situation you see?
So I think the Arab world is in a unique situation in that there are there's 20 countries and 2 states where the written language is pretty much the same in all of the countries, but the spoken language is very different in each country. And so not only dialects and accents, but also variations on the language. So I think that's quite an interesting and unique situation. But going back to the UK, just it's quite interesting hearing talking about Austria. In the UK, it's quite often unknown that we have many languages spoken in the UK. Perhaps the strongest one is Welsh. And many of the schools do teach Welsh in the schools in Wales, and a lot of the signage is in Welsh as well as English. You go into the supermarkets, the banking, and any official documents are all in Welsh as well as English. It's not so strong with the other languages in Scotland and Northern Ireland as it is with the Welsh, but they do a very good job in preserving the language, teaching the language, making sure the children learn the language as well. But certainly in England, we're very poor at learning other languages. In the schools, it's not very well taught other languages. Sometimes it's French, other times you may have a bit of Spanish and German. French would be the main one that is taught, but it's not taught very widely. And yet somewhere you go on a London Underground and you might hear 30 different languages being spoken around you, not very often English. You know, not very often you hear English spoken around you. So I think in England we're exposed to different languages and different cultures, but they're not taught them in schools, which I think is a shame.
And Nadeem, you must be thinking that these guys are talking about very complex issues, and which is actually not going to be an issue very soon.
I don't know. I mean, I'll finish talking about AI in a second. But the thing that I've observed about language is, apart from being a cultural expression, I find it interesting that German has a particular structure. that is very different from the way the French structure their language. And you see the culture almost written in the way that the language is formed, and in the structure of roads and other manifestations of the national kind of psyche, if you like. But I think what I found difficult about some languages is the way they are used as tools of power. So there was a great pirate queen that lived off the west coast of Ireland, which is called Gronwy. And Gronwy used to have these boats that she would sail up and down the west coast of Ireland, and she would raid all the British Navy ships and take all of their goods from them. And she drove the Queen of England crazy. And it was eventually decided that she could never be captured, she could never be defeated, but maybe she could be invited to come and parley, to talk. And so she agreed to meet the Queen of England, this pirate queen, who was just a criminal off the west coast. And her requirement was that the meeting with the English Queen had to be conducted in a neutral language, in Latin. So she didn't speak Irish, the Queen didn't speak English, they talked to each other in Latin. And I think, you see the power of language to divide, to be used for diplomacy. International treaties were all written in French until, sometime in the last century. So, thinking about the subject of today's panel, engaging with a multilingual tradition, I think is incredibly important. And we have to be careful not to make one language inferior to another. I spent quite a lot of time in Thailand, and people from the northeast tend to speak from the province called Isan, they speak Lao, and as soon as you hear Lao being spoken in Thailand, you have a certain social perception of those people. I think that's a shame. And I think that's probably why English is being so successful, because it's a lingua franca. It's hard to tell your social stratification, your power, or anything else if you all speak English, then you start on a neutral territory. And I think that's probably why it's being so successful as kind of the world language. But to come to AI, because I know you want me to say something about AI, I think AI has a great positive force in making easy translation of a reasonably good quality, readily available at almost no cost. And that means that a Mongolian author suddenly finds a readership in England, or a Peruvian author suddenly finds somebody whose native language is Hindi reading their work. And I think that ability to become the lingua franca, for AI to become the lingua franca, just to say it goes in as Peruvian, it comes out as Hindi, is fantastically bringing together the world to a unified state of understanding each other's culture. On the margins, and it's quite a big margin, there's a lot of craft and genius and insight and sensitivity about translation and understanding really what an author meant exactly, that is lost by AI. So I think there'll always be the need for human excellence in translation, but I love that AI is making previously hidden works across different cultures so readily available around the world. And again, thinking about India, if there's some people with the hundreds, if not thousands of languages spoken here, who can now understand the rest of the country better, I think that's fantastic.
Thank you. So this pirates and even invaders or colonists, whichever way you want to hold them, they were quite in a complicated situation in language. Vasco da Gama spoke to the Samoan in Arabic, and a Portuguese person speaking to a Malayali in Arabic. That was the language system at that time. So I think I will open this forum for questions if there are any questions. Audience.
May I add something on the little intervention about dialects? We were talking about dialects. They are almost lost now in the German, let's say, speaking areas because of television. We didn't talk about television. This has taken over somehow some part of the education of society because people are watching all day long. And if they watch the German language, then it's always from Germany because they're dominating, translating all these TV series and whatever comes in from the United States and other countries. And so they speak somehow a German idiom and no more the Viennese or the local one. So if there are some old Viennese are talking, even the youngest, they don't understand all the words they use because this is somehow lost. Because it is an own language somehow. For example, ich bin gewesen, ich war. Ich bin gewesen is Ivor. So this is nobody will understand it if he knows only the High German. This is a little thought only to add. Sorry.
Like, any questions or then I will request Krishna to make a closing comment. I mean, all of you to make closing comments.
My closing comment is that if you live in a multilingual society, to me the great danger of a multilingual society is a thing that's very well studied in linguistics, which is called dysglossia. I don't know if you pronounce like that in English, dysglossia. Dysglossia. So dysglossia is a thing that you should avoid, you know. And for instance, I was quoting that I am myself a bilingual. When I was in Spain, when I was a kid, there was a dysglossia between Catalan and Spanish. Dysglossia means basically that you speak two languages, like a bilingual. But these two languages are not in equal foot, okay? One will be the language of power, the language that you use to communicate with your elders, with the people who are really important, etc., etc. And the other language that you speak will be the language, home language, and then you speak. I've seen that dysglossia very strong in India. Many people, they will speak English with their peers, they will speak English with other people, but they will speak Hindi with the servants. Even sometimes you find people who are even proud of not speaking Hindi properly because they can show that I are. So I think I go to Spain. When I was a kid, there was a dysglossia between my language, Catalan, and Spanish. Democracy came and dysglossia was finished. Now both Spanish and Catalan can be used for serious reasons. I can study Catalan, I can use Catalan as in the parliament, etc., etc. So in Spain, we fought against the dysglossia. And I say again, in India, still you will find many shades of this dysglossia between smaller and language of power. So my message is avoid dysglossia.
Michael.
Yeah, Oscar, we had a discussion now bilateral here about a lost in translation. The verb you used and what we understood is completely something different. I would say with languages, this is a richness. If you have it in the country, use it as good as possible because always every language opens you a new culture. Because there always in every language are some words you can't really translate directly. You need descriptions, you work around to find the meaning. So this is really, you open a new world. So keep it on, do it because it would be, and when a language is gone, it's lost, and nobody is reviving that so easily. Absolutely. So please do that, and this would be mine to give it to you, to the Indian audience here. This is something you should do and work on, and also invest some money. It needs always money also. So if there are somebody around with money, please invest in that. Thank you.
I think you're right about preservation of language and how important that is, and that's where publishing as an industry has its strengths because we are the record keepers of stories and language. And I think in my closing comments, I wanted to say how encouraged I've been over the last 5 years in particular on how the Indian publishing industry has evolved and how Indian publishers have become much more active in selling translation rights, both amongst themselves in between the different languages, but also in going out into other languages. And I've been particularly encouraged to see things like the literature festivals and translation grants that are made available to translate, for example, Tamil books into other languages, and the support that's being given across the country to make sure that these stories are being able to be told on the international stage. And we're already seeing the fruits of those efforts and the awareness now around the world of different cultures within India being translated into different languages. So I hope to see much more of that to come and see more Tombs of Sand winning international Booker prizes, for example.
Thank you. Nothing, sir.
I love language for the way that it expresses personality. I'm a psychologist, and so I'm always wondering what it is that makes people what they are. So when I see something like, multilingual living tradition, I think that's a multicultural living tradition. It's an opportunity to really learn from the way that people speak. So I'm always trying to encourage people to be curious about the language structure that people use. Again, an Irish example. I live in England, but I have an Irish culture. And so the English will say on a very cold day, gosh, the wind is so cold, or it's a freezing wind, isn't it? Maybe they'll say it's biting, and it's kind of notion of being bitten by wind. The Irish will say something like, that wind is so cold it would go through you for a shortcut. And it's a much more lyrical, visual manifestation of what they feel cold is. It's so cold it would go through you for a shortcut. And equally, you know, an English person would be likely to be simpler in the expression and say something like, I drank a lot last night, but I'm thirsty. And the Irish one will say, no matter how hard I try to drown myself every night, I wake up thirsty, which means that they drank too much the night before. So I think, you know, if you can take an interest in the very many different languages of India, you know, you'll all speak some of them, but take an active curiosity in the others and learn how people have values and psychologies through that. I think it's fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you, Nadeem Sadiq, Emma House, Michael Paul, and Oscar Pujol. It was a very interesting panel. One half Irish, half Egyptian person speaking here in English. Emma, who knows Spanish also, and English, and an Austrian who speaks 3 languages at home, and Sanskrit scholar with Catalan origins and I can say Spanish national, and I am a Malayali in Delhi. So it's quite it shows a kaleidoscope of languages. Thank you so much. I will request our chief editor, Ms. Neeraj Vasundhara Lal, to felicitate my. Thanking all of you. We have a good feedback. So thank you very much for the kind audience. Thank you.